Hello again. This is a kukri. This is a First World War British Army kukri. It's actually my son's. You can see it's really had a hard life. It's been ground down, sharpened quite a lot, so it's kind of lost its nice shape. And I wanted to make one. My dad had one of these when I was young. He'd got it on the way back from Burma after the war. His one had a nice bone handle and had never been used. It was made in an Indian market. It wasn't a real one, not a fighting one, but it was sharp and I was never really allowed to touch it much. So I thought I'd like to make one out of steel. So I decided to make a template from this one, and I decided when I was making the template I'd actually make it just a bit fatter here on the cheek, just to round it out. Best things to make templates from: cereal packets. It's always good to keep your templates in case you need to make something again. When I drew this, I was thinking of maybe I'll just cut a tang out and put the wood, have the tang go actually into the handle. In the end I decided to actually cut the whole piece out of steel. So I got a piece of 8mm thick steel. This is actually the remains of the piece. It was rather thick. It's 01 ground flat stock tool steel again. It does give you the ability to harden it in oil if you want to, but I've chosen not to because I don't really want to put an edge on it. And I've got some stills showing the piece of steel and all the drill holes, so I'll put them in now. So I cut out the piece of steel and I sanded all the edges, filed all the edges. So I'll show you those now. When I'd filed all the edges, I came out with a shape. This is actually the end result. But tell you a bit about it. It starts off really thick on the back, like the First World War one does. It's quite thick, so that's why I got the thick piece of 8mm thick steel. But I started to realise that when you go from 8mm down to 1mm and 1mm along this side, there's an awful lot of steel here to take off. So I got a bit lazy again because I was having a hard time with the file, and I used my bench grinder that I used for sharpening chisels, and I went along here and used that for a bit. But when you start to use that, you get little hollows, and then it takes you ages with the file to take them back out, and it drives you mad. I got a nice curve on the back. I tend to use a nice flat file for doing the curves, because you can just get a nice movement, nice sweeping curve, and you can get a nice shape. And then for the thingy that I don't know the name of, that lots of people have different ideas what it actually is for, be it for catching blood droplets or religious meanings or whatever, I decided to put my own variety in. You can see here it's kind of like two little pyramid type thingies, and I wanted to bring the curve of the blade back out so it actually comes back out and makes more of a feature of this, and then rounded here with some round files, just rounded it off in here. The actual handle, I'll show you some stills in a minute. The handle was made from had some branches of English boxwood, and had some nice patterns in it. Probably water damage maybe. So I cut it in half, and I glued the two halves. I didn't glue them actually. I drilled some holes in the tang, 2 8mm holes, put some bolts through, and held the pieces of wood on, and then I started to carve. Excuse me. I used my dragon's teeth again, and I'll just show you those stills now. So I had the bolts through, as you could see in the stills, and I was carving here. But you have to remember, this thing has a nice straight edge, and that straight edge is really good for doing angles on straight lines. When it comes to curves, if you're not careful, what you end up with is this. You end up with cut lines and angles where you wanted nice curves. You get little cut lines, and then it takes ages to get them out, and when you're trying to get them out, it starts to ruin your curve. So there's a bit of a learning process here. I do like the shape of this, but it's just, you go too quick at something, you take off too much wood. Boxwood is quite soft. You take too much off, and then you're forever trying to get yourself back to where you want it to be. I decided, when I had actually got the handle on and bolted on, that I did like the tang going through. So I decided to keep the tang visible, and I curved over the end. I had thought of putting a piece of hammered brass on the end, but then when I actually did it, I like being able to see the tang. So I took the bolts out, got some epoxied it on, put some of good old B&Q brass, cut some brass rods, hammered them through, left them proud on each side so I could sand it down. But because it was 5-minute epoxy, everything was in a rush. While I was hammering them through, oops, bit of disappointment, broke it off. There you go, one of those things. And then I thought, well, I want this to actually look old, so why don't I just leave it there? It's a bit of damage, could have happened in use. So I carried on, I sanded the blade to 120, and thought, looks a bit shiny as you could see from the pictures. Thought, I really need to make this blade look like it's worn, like it's old, like it's had a bit of a tough life. So looked up some stuff on the internet and saw that if you mix hydrogen peroxide and vinegar, white vinegar, with a bit of salt, and apply it to your steel, which I did with a cotton bud, that you can actually make it start to rust. And it rusts quite quick, it rusts in front of your eyes. So I put some of that on, it started to rust, I then cleaned it off. There's some young lads go past there. I did it again, I did it several times, I'd clean it off, do it again. What I also then did was, I put a piece of cling film down, put the knife on it, put lots of the mixture on it. This one, I just got this from Amazon. Oh, it's that one I got from Asda. I put it down some cling film, put lots of the liquid on it, folded the cling film over, wrapped it up in tin foil, masking taped it all, and set it out on the garden all day on a hot day. And it all puffed up, because this gives off oxygen as it starts to corrode the metal. Left it there, cleaned it off, and I actually did put some on the wood as well, because it gave it a nice rusty look. I've left, I haven't neutralised the acid or anything, I've left it on so that even though I went and sanded it down again and made it nice and smooth, it started to get rusty again, and it's just giving it has actually brought the edge up, so the edge is actually quite sharp now. Well, it's not sharp, but I suppose if you got hit with it, you'd feel it. But it's not sharp. But it just gives it a nice old look. It's not the shiny piece of steel that I bought, you know, because if you leave it like the tool stock you get, you just end up with a shiny piece of steel that looks, whereas this has got nice patterning in it from where it was sitting in the solution. I found out later, there's a really good video by Walter Sorrells, and he goes into how you do it properly. And one of the things you do is use a hot air gun on it, which makes it rust really quick. And you can actually then blacken it by boiling it in water, and it changes the actual makeup of the rust into hematite and other stuff, other basic types of iron oxides. So that's how it turned out. I'm really pleased with it. One thing that I did use when I was sanding the handle here is I used this sanding drum in my drill. Now that really speeds up when you're sanding, but remember to put one of these on. You get them on the internet. You get the replacement thingies when they get choked up with dust. You don't want to be breathing in wood dust. It's not good for your lungs, and you just don't want to do it. So if you're doing it by hand, it's not a problem. But if you're using something like this, then wear a mask. This thing was actually sitting. This is the people who make it. That's what it is. It was sitting in that box for about 15 years on my shelf. My dad had given it to me, and I never knew what was in the container. One day I opened it and thought, look at that. So this is 80 grit paper, and it's really good on getting into curves when you haven't already made a mess of them. And it's good for sanding down, and it also just sanded off the steel just to get it flush with the wood. Takes the araldite off, it just tidies it all up. And there's my finished kukri. It's nice and heavy. It feels like the real thing, although, you know. So I'm happy that I've got something that I've made myself, and it looks quite nice there. All it takes is a bit of time and effort. Put a bit of time and effort in, some basic tools, and turn up with something that, you know, if you're into that type of thing, it's really nice to have. Something that you've made yourself. So, thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed that.